Do you hear that? That is the sound of a lot of angry customers. You see, as fewer and fewer airlines fly out of Marketville, customer dissatisfaction has been steadily increasing. People are fed up with fewer options of where to fly. They're sick of ticket prices increasing while the level of customer service decreases. What these angry travelers want, what they need, is a more competitive market, more airlines to come in and fight for these folks' hard-earned travel budget. But how do we increase competition in the marketplace? How can we break the grip of monopolies and oligopolies to better meet the needs of consumers? Well, there are market approaches to increasing competition in the airline industry that would allow it to remain profitable while increasing options, lowering price, and offering innovative services. At the most basic level, consumers can choose whether or not to purchase a good or service from firms operating in monopolies or oligopolies. Instead of flying for vacations, people can take trains or even drive. But there are always situations where using these firms' goods and services is unavoidable. If a business person has an emergency meeting on the other side of the country the next day, flying may be their only option. For entrepreneurs, starting a business to compete in a non-competitive market is always a possibility. But, and it's a big but, there has to be the potential for profit. In the case of airlines, maybe some of the operating costs come down, or maybe a group of investors come into a large amount of money, making it easier to start operations. And finally, private individuals and organizations can help improve the market. Journalists and watchdog groups can make the general public aware of issues in non-competitive markets. If an airline oversells flights and keeps bumping passengers at the last minute, letting the world know what is happening can be a powerful tool for change. Sure, these firms might be one of a handful offering a good or service, but they still care about their public reputation. They might be inclined to change their policies and practices to improve prices and service to avoid having their brand dragged through the mud. Let's check in for a moment. A company has a monopoly on the production of a drug used to treat allergic reactions. The drug costs several $100s per dose. Recently, there were a series of negative news articles about the salary of the company's chief executive. This led to the company announcing a review of the price structure for the drug. How did private market forces help protect consumer welfare? By highlighting how this monopoly might negatively impact consumers, the news articles put pressure on the company to examine its pricing in order to maintain a positive reputation among consumers and other stakeholders. And while market-based solutions can help improve conditions in a non-competitive market, ultimately, the government is the only stakeholder with enough power and leverage to ensure consumer welfare. One thing the government can do to increase competition in a market is help lower barriers to entry for firms through subsidies and tax breaks. Government has the power to oversee and regulate markets to protect consumers as well. Regulations let businesses know what they can and cannot do in order to protect consumer welfare. For example, if an airline cancels your flight at the last moment, the Department of Transportation has an entire set of guidelines for what the airline needs to provide you with or how much they need to compensate you. And if companies refuse to follow guidelines, the government can impose fines and penalties. Sometimes governments even set what are known as price controls to protect consumers. Price controls are laws and policies that prevent companies from overcharging consumers. For example, the government can limit an airline's ability to charge fees for things like checked bags. Plus, government agencies like the Federal Trade Commission can prevent monopolies and oligopolies from occurring by blocking companies from merging. If two national airlines are considering joining together, the government can block that deal if the decrease in competition negatively impacts consumers. There are also laws designed to break up monopolies that are detrimental to consumers. Statutes like the Sherman and Clayton Antitrust Acts allow the government to break up monopolies in order to increase competition in the marketplace. Instead of having one airline, the government could break it down into smaller airlines that compete with each other in the market. Our lesson in U.S. history, monopolies, and trust busting does a great job covering the history of government intervention in non-competitive markets. And as a last resort, the government can nationalize companies in non-competitive markets. Nationalization is the process by which a government takes control of a business or industry from the private sector. But nationalizing industries in market-oriented economies happens very rarely, usually only in times of extreme emergency or industries deemed essential to national security. Time for another check-in. There is one company that provides electricity to all of a town's residents. Why might the government choose oversight and regulation of the company as opposed to other methods? After you've answered, let's meet back up to go over the answer. By choosing regulation and oversight, the government can ensure that there aren't disruptions to service while also protecting consumer welfare. When dealing with non-competitive markets, balancing private market solutions and government actions is essential to guaranteeing consumer welfare. Consumers, journalists, and watchdog groups are essential to bringing awareness to the impact of monopolies and oligopolies in the marketplace. But it often takes sustained and coordinated action by these private individuals and groups to even begin to force monopolies and oligopolies to improve their business practices. For example, muckraking journalist Ida Tarbell published a series of articles about the practices of Standard Oil, one of the biggest monopolies in history. And what happens if these businesses don't have the financial incentive to improve their business practices? Odds are pretty good that they won't change. And that is where the government needs to step in. The scope and authority of the government gives it the power to protect consumer welfare, improve market conditions, and encourage competition. Okay, one last check-in. Your neighbor is complaining about the electric company, which has a monopoly on providing service to your town. However, that neighbor believes that private individuals and businesses need to sort it out, and that the government shouldn't intervene. What can you say to them to change their mind? While private individuals can highlight the impact of monopolies, like the electric company, the government has the power and authority to deal with these companies in order to protect consumer welfare. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to review. In non-competitive markets like monopolies and oligopolies, there are different market and government-based solutions to protect consumer welfare and encourage competition. On the market side, individuals can use their power as consumers to influence businesses, and while this may require large-scale coordinated action, it can impact a company's ability to generate revenue, hopefully leading to better outcomes for consumers. Some entrepreneurs may even choose to start companies in these industries if there is a likelihood that they can be profitable, and more firms in a market increases competition. And third parties like journalists and watchdog groups can help educate the public about non-competitive markets and their impact on consumers. But the government also has a role to play, whether it's preventing monopolies from forming, regulating non-competitive markets, or even breaking up companies that are monopolies. Tomorrow, we are going to look at how certain differences in our income and the things that influence income can impact markets. But till then, keep investing in yourself, one lesson at a time. I'll see you next time.
Hey, hey.